Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm hoping you can all hear me. I'm hoping everyone can see me. My name is Elle McNicoll. I am so excited to be here today to talk to you about my new book, which came out yesterday, Show Us Who You Are, but also my debut, A Kind of Spark, which just won the Blue Peter Book Award. I don't know if you can see the Blue Peter badge I now have, which means I can go to the zoo for free when it opens up again. So that's exciting. Thank you so much for coming to this event today. What I tend to do when I talk to schools, and this is before I won the Blue Peter Book Award, is I talk a little bit about me, why I became a writer and how I became a writer, and then I talk a little bit about my, usually, A Kind of Spark. But now I have two books to talk about, so I'm going to talk about both. I'll probably go in a linear way. So I'll tell you about me and how I became a writer and all that. Talk a little bit about Spark. Then I'll talk about Show Us Who You Are. I call them Show and Spark for short. I hope that makes sense. So when I say spark, I mean A Kind of Spark, and when I say show, I mean Show Us Who You Are, because I'm very lazy and I abbreviate my book titles and I talk very quickly, as you can see, so I'm going to slow down. But then I'll talk about Show Us Who You Are, which came out yesterday, published yesterday. And like you just heard, there is a Q&A function, and I know that there are already some pre-sent questions, but what I love to do when I do these events is I love to encourage people to ask any and all questions they have. If you have questions about being a writer, if you have questions about publishing, if you have questions about being neurodivergent, that is something I'm going to get to and I'll explain what that means. If you have questions about any of the books. And if you have questions about Blue Peter, I can now talk about that. It's been a secret for a while. If you have any questions at all, put them in the chat, tell your teacher. It's no bother. I love any and all questions. There are no silly questions. And I love to chat to people and I give long, rambling answers to whatever the question is. So feel free to ask whatever you like. Can't wait to hear. So I am a neurodivergent author, and that is a very long word. And if we break it into two, neuro, which means brain, and divergent, which means different or differing. And that's a way of saying different brain, as I'm sure you can tell. You put those together, we get a different brain. And it's a catch-all term, which is meaning like an umbrella term for many, many conditions. So being autistic, I am autistic, like Addie in A Kind of Spark, like Cora in Show Us Who You Are. I am also dyspraxic. Maybe some of you are as well. You can be neurodivergent if you are dyslexic, if you are ADHD, if you have Tourette's. These are all conditions that fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. And I just say that at the beginning of every talk so that you guys know what I mean when I say someone is neurodivergent, like me. Just means we have a different brain. So we could be autistic, we could have a learning difficulty, just means that we are, we think and see the world in a slightly different way. And that's it. Not better, not worse, different, but equal. So I am autistic, like I said, and so are the characters in my books. And the reason I decided to write autistic characters like me is when I was your age, I was a very keen reader. And reading was very encouraged at school because of wonderful teachers and because of wonderful things like World Book Day, which we've just had yesterday. And I love to read. I would blitz through the library. I would finish a book in a day. I was absolutely a fiend. I just loved books. And I love storybooks, all different kinds, adventures, like Treasure Island, and contemporary books like Jacqueline Wilson, fantasy like Harry Potter, sort of fairy tales like Robin McKinley. I just loved any and all books, and I would go through them like a fiend, like a Tasmanian devil, just consuming them. But after a while, after maybe 2 years of being a voracious reader, I started to notice that there weren't ever any characters in books who are like me. There were girls, there's more girls in books now, which is fantastic. But there was female characters when I was young. I'm 28, in case anyone's wondering. I know that will seem ancient to you, but it's not too old. It was, I was at school 10 years ago. So there were books about girls, there was occasionally books about people from Scotland, which is where I'm from, but there were never any neurodivergent people. Like I've just told you, people who are different, neurologically different. There were never any neurodivergent people in books. And I never even saw the word autism in a storybook for a long, long time. And the reason I start all my talks with that is because at the time I was aware of it and I was thinking, this is strange. I never see anybody like me in a book. Maybe the authors haven't heard of people like me. Maybe people who work in publishing have never heard of people like me. Maybe I'm the only one. And that's a silly thing to think. But at, 10, 11, 12 years old, I didn't know anyone else like me. And I just thought I might be the only one because I didn't know anyone. And I couldn't find myself in a storybook. And I really wanted to. I wanted to see somebody like me in a Jacqueline Wilson book. I wanted to see somebody like me going on an adventure, but it never happened. And I took that message and I, logged it away in my brain without really kind of unpacking what that meant. And I just thought as a kid, I suppose people like me are not supposed to be in stories. And that's incredibly sad, but that's how I felt at the time. And it hurt and it was, painful. And this goes for film and television as well. At the time there wasn't anybody, I never saw anyone like me on film or TV who was autistic or neurodivergent. Just didn't happen. And I just thought, wow, I am alone in this big old universe. There's not, I don't see myself in stories. And now as an adult, we know that how important it is to see ourselves in stories, right? Because, it's a way of getting self-esteem and reflection, and it's really important. And at the time when I was a kid, I didn't fully grasp that. I was just quite sad. But no matter, I suppressed those feelings and I pushed them to one side and I went and, lived my life. And I was in my 20s and I was trying to get a job in publishing, which is the industry that makes books, which, we spent the whole week talking about books, right? The people that make them are people who work in publishing. And I wanted to work in publishing as a proofreader, someone who checks the spelling, or as an editor, someone who helps with the ideas. I was like, I'm going to be in publishing and that would be great. And when I get a job in publishing after I've worked my butt off for a year or so, I'm going to start looking for neurodivergent writers, people who are like me who write stories. I'm going to find them and I'm going to publish them. And that is the dream. So I started to go into these meetings with publishers, and there's lots of publishers in the UK. If you look at the spine of any book that you own, the publisher's emblem is always on the bottom, and there's so many. It's a fun thing to do, just like how lots of cars have different hood ornaments and they're all different makes. Publishers, there's lots of them, many, many types of publishers. And I was in a lot of their offices in London. And I would go in and they would say, wow, you used to be a bookseller and you have a master's degree and all this stuff. You must, you'd be a great asset to our publishing house. What are you passionate about? And I would say, I'm really passionate about neurodivergent representation. I want to see more autistic kids in books. And I would just see like, their faces would go, nope, we don't want to have anything to do with that. And I thought at the time, I thought, oh, that doesn't feel very good. And then it happened again, and it happened again, and it happened again. And I thought, okay, I'm not imagining things. A lot of people in publishing don't want to publish books about people like me. And I thought there must be a reason that they don't want to publish books about people like me. And so I started to say after a few meetings, I said, look, why not? Why don't you think that's a good idea? And there were so many different answers. Some people said, well, I don't think those books will sell. So that's one. This is going to come back later. So if we can remember these, I don't think that book will sell. That was one. I don't think children will like it. Two. I don't think booksellers will like it. Three. And those people do not read books, let alone write them. Four. So those four things are going to come back. Now, that last thing that they said, those people don't read books, let alone write them, that echoed around in my head. And I thought, that has to change. That attitude, that mindset, that is wrong. It's the same attitude of when, boys say that girls can't do something because they're girls. Or it's just that mindset of it's bigoted, it's prejudiced, it's not based in fact, it's unkind, it's cruel, and it's keeping people out of rooms that they should be inside of. So that changed everything. And I thought, right, I can't keep doing this because these people don't respect me. They don't think I'm worth as much as them. They don't see the value in what I want to do. I don't know if this is an industry I want to work in. And my other half, my boyfriend said, please just try one more. Try one more and then give up. And I said, okay, I'll try one more before I give up. And again, I just wanted to work in publishing. And I heard of this publisher called Knights of, as in Knights of the Round Table. And they publish books that are always inclusive, meaning they publish books about Black kids, about Muslim kids, about Jewish kids, about gay kids, about, any kind of child or author really who is underrepresented in the industry. They will champion. And I thought, that's fantastic. They're trying to fix the problem. They're trying to uplift people who deserve to see themselves more in stories. And I set up a meeting. I said, excuse me, I talked a lot yesterday. I set up a meeting and I said, hi, I'm a neurodivergent editor. If you ever need me to edit a book or proofread something, I'm happy to do it. And David, the publisher, said, well, we're a small publisher, we're tiny, we're only a couple years old. And what we do is very difficult. It's an uphill climb to try and get people to understand our message. We don't have any job openings. And I said, okay, that's fine. And they were so lovely. So I thought, that's no problem. And inside I was thinking, well, that's it. I'm giving up. I'm going to find a different career. And then David said, do you have a book that you've written? And like I told you guys, I've been a voracious reader since I was a kid, and most voracious readers start trying to write because that's the next step. Just like someone who loves music starts to play music, somebody that loves books starts to write them. I'd been a writer my whole life, but I'd never shown anybody anything I'd written. But when he said, do you have a book? I thought, I have nothing to lose. I have everything to gain. I'm so tired of the way I've been treated these past couple of years. I said, yes, I have 2/3 of a book, and it's about this autistic girl, and she finds out that her small town in Scotland persecuted lots of people for being witches, and she decides to campaign for a memorial to be made. And David said, that's great. We'd love to read that. And I thought, okay. And I sent it to him. And 2 weeks later, we signed a contract. And that book was A Kind of Spark, which is my debut. And now, remember those 4 things I told you to remember? They said, what did they say? They said, books like this won't sell. A Kind of Spark, even though it came out in a pandemic, it came out in June and shops were all shut. A Kind of Spark is a bestseller. It's sold enough copies to be called a bestseller. What did they say next too? Gosh, what did they say next? they said kids won't like it. Well, the Blue Peter Book Award, which I have next to me, the great thing about this award is it's voted for by children. So there's a judging panel of 200 kids and they have to vote for the book that is their favorite, the one they enjoy the most. They voted for A Kind of Spark. So 2 was not correct either. 3, booksellers don't like those books. Booksellers are a very diverse group of people and they all have their own opinions, and that's why it's great. But I have had the most incredible outpouring of support from booksellers. They have championed this book like it was their own. It's been unbelievable. And here I am today with 4 indies, and independent bookshops are the lifeblood of the industry, and they absolutely got behind the book. There was no problem. It was A Kind of Spark was October's book of the month in Waterstones. Blackwell's booksellers voted it the best book of 2020. Not just a children's book, all books. It beat the adult books, and that was voted for by booksellers. So 3 was not true either. That's 3 things that were completely false that they said. And fourth, well, the 4th thing they said was people like me don't read, let alone write. And that is obviously not true. And the support I've had for A Kind of Spark and for Show Us Who You Are, which has only been out a day, every day I wake up and there's an essay from a person I've never met telling me how much they love the book, telling me how much the books mean to them, telling me how much it means to their kids or to their friends or to their siblings. And it's unbelievable. Teachers and librarians have got behind it. It's just been the most unbelievable 9 months of support. So everything those people said was wrong. Everything got proven wrong. And And I want to talk a little bit about this one as well, but I'll circle back to them being completely wrong before I go over to questions. So this is book two. This is called Show Us Who You Are. And like A Kind of Spark, it has an autistic heroine, but it's a science fiction book. I wanted to write something adventurous. I wanted to write something plotty and fast and exciting. And it's about these two kids, Cora and Adrian. Cora is autistic, Adrian has ADHD. They're best friends. And Adrian's father has a company called Pomegranate. And it's a very sophisticated, swishy, expensive company. And they make digital holograms of real people. So it's like a digital Madame Tussauds. And Cora thinks it's the most incredible thing she's ever heard of. Adrian thinks it's horrible. And that's the one thing they fight over because they're best friends. But then it turns out that something sinister is happening at Pomegranate. The holograms, are being used in a very sinister way. So it's a bit of a thriller as well. And it's been out a day. And I can't say much more than that because it's got so many twists and turns, but it's been out a day. And what's been great is a few copies arrived early and people have been reading it. And there's a certain thing that happens in chapter 13 that I can't talk about, but it's why I put it in chapter 13. And people keep sending me pictures of themselves as they read the book and as they get to that moment, and their faces are so horrified and they want to read exactly what happens next. And it's been very funny. And so a lot of people have ordered the book yesterday because they go, what is going on in chapter 13? I have to know. And don't ask me because I won't tell you, but it's very exciting book. And as you can see, it's chock-a-block, much more chunky than A Kind of Spark. But they're just two very different books. This is a bit like, us. I like to say it's a bit like Anne of Green Gables or Anne with an E, if you like that. It's a small town. It's a girl with, a small community, and she goes up against her parish council to try and get this memorial made. And it's all a bit comedic and about, it's a nice kind of small town story. And then Show Us Who You Are is this action-packed sci-fi, kind of like Black Mirror, and very, very full of plot and a bit of a thriller. So they're very different, but they both have neurodivergent leads, which is exactly what I wanted when I was your age, when I was younger. I wrote the books that I really wanted to read myself when I was a kid in the library or when I was a kid at school on World Book Day. And I wanted to have a book to myself that nobody else knew. I wrote the books that I really would have loved to read as a kid. And I think that's good advice to any young writers, is to always write the book that you want to read. But there was a moment yesterday. So yesterday was Show Us Who You Are's publication day, but it got completely overshadowed by A Kind of Spark winning the Blue Peter Book Award. And I had to be on live television, and I had to meet the Blue Peter presenters, and I had to meet Henry the dog, who was beautiful. And I had to be in the Blue Peter studios, had to get tested for COVID to make sure it was safe, had to, masks, everyone was very, very careful. But it's this huge, big studio. And as I'm walking around this studio, and I'm meeting Henry the dog, and I'm getting my badge on, and I'm meeting the presenters who are lovely, and I'm seeing all the drawings people have done for World Book Day, and I'm hearing all of the feedback from the kids that loved the book and that voted for it to win, which was unbelievable. As that was happening, it was also, publication day for my second book. And writing a one book is hard, let alone writing two. And I wrote this one in lockdown. I think that's why it's got so much imagination in it, because I was locked in a room writing it. But, I had a moment at Blue Peter as the doors were about to open, where they go, the winner is Elle McNicoll. Way. The doors were about to open. I just had a moment standing backstage in the dark, looking at these doors, and all those voices of those people who said, you can't do this. Nobody will like this. This isn't any good. You'll never be this. You'll never be that. You aren't the right kind of person for this, as well as all of the bullying that I got when I was your age for being different. All of the terrible things people said and the way that made me feel, it all kind of swirled around in my head as I was standing in front of these doors waiting for them to open. And it was like they just all got very loud and then exploded and vanished, because I just thought, it's over. It doesn't matter. They were all wrong. None of what they said was true. None of it came true. A Kind of Spark has just won a huge award, and people love it and are buying it. And And people who are like me are reaching out and saying, thank you for putting someone like me in a book. I relate to this. I see myself in this. And that is unbelievable to me. And I don't feel alone anymore. Like there's so many other people like me now. There's so many kids like me reading the book and loving it. And that's incredible. And so as those doors opened and we got to pick up this incredible award, I just thought, this is it. Everything's changed now. There's neurodivergent kids and stories, and we're not going back. This is it. And I tell that story. I talk about, these things when I do school visits because I just know how when you're a very creative person, there's always doubters, there's always naysayers and negative people saying, you can't do it, you're not any good, this will never happen. And it can get so easy sometimes to listen to that. And sometimes the reason people say that to you over and over again is because they want you to start saying it to yourself. And I'm not going to say that to myself anymore. And I'm not going to listen to people that say things like that. I'm so lucky I get to do this job and I get to write fun, exciting, touching, hopefully moving stories for everyone, not just people like me. And yeah, so yesterday I just was feeling all of those feelings. And you guys are the are the lucky ones that get to see me word vomit all of that to you today. But you know, Blue Peter aside, Show Us Who You Are is a book about friendship. It's about connection. It's about, best friends kind of taking on a big scary enemy. It's got a dog in it, which I love. And it's kind of this adventurous, imaginative sci-fi story that I didn't know I would be able to write until I did it. And people say they love it more than A Kind of Spark, which is incredible. And I'm so thrilled that it's published now. I'm still digesting that. It came out yesterday and it is now published. And I'm so happy to talk to you guys about it. And I hope you have some questions. Like I said, I will answer any and all questions except what happens in chapter 13 because that is classified. But thank you so much for coming today. And I'm excited to hand back over for the Q&A. And I can't wait to answer any questions that you have.
I'm here, Elle. I am here. Hi. Oh, wow. That was wonderful. Thank you. It's so lovely to hear your passion and your story for your writing and what you do. So thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, yeah, it must just be so surreal for you that are you still sort of like pinching yourself? And
yeah, it's so strange. And I mean, everyone watching, we're all in kind of strange times at the moment, but it was absolutely one of the most life-changing things, and it just brought everything about the last 9 months that has been life-changing into one moment, and that's been very overwhelming.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure. And what about your family and people, your friends, perhaps back home in Scotland as well? Because obviously it's set, isn't it? Just in a small village outside Edinburgh. So people who live where you've set your story, they must be really proud of it as well.
I really hope so. And my family are so proud. They're the biggest supporters, and it's been the thing that's got everyone, through and happy the last 9 months. And yeah, there's people now sort of creeping around our village back home looking for things that are mentioned in the book. And so that's interesting.
Do you think there might be, like how they do these sort of literary tours, where
I
books
hope
are
so.
sort of, that would be so good.
My dad would run them happily. He would happily lead everyone around. He would make things up. It would, happy to do it.
That would be so good. And I just sort of wanted to ask you, as I said in the introduction, I absolutely just love this book from page one. And it's really heartwarming. There are parts of it that, even me, you're only 28, as you said, you're a very young person. And I'm a lot older than you, but it took me right back to my sort of school days. And I just wondered whether you thought that was like the book really touched me. And obviously the reaction that it's getting, it's touching other people. And I just wondered if do you have a theory about why that is?
I mean, I hope the reason is because I remember so vividly being 10, 11 years old, which was the age where everything starts kind of changing and you're starting that transition into senior school. Friendship groups are changing, but particularly with girls, bullying is quite rife, I think, at that age, and very specific, and it's done in a very specific way. You're not going to get pushed into a locker or, pushed down the stairs. And if anyone has had that happen, tell someone. But the bullying is much more subtle, much more clever. And I just remember how, I mean, traumatizing that could be when I was 11. I just would go home every day and my parents would say, "What happened at school?" And I just was like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to relive it. It's not, I have like, I don't know, it's like a molecule in me from that time that has never aged. And I just remember vividly what that felt like. And it's all better now and it all goes away. And you do look back and think, gosh, it's so silly, but it feels so real when you're that age. And I think I put that into Addie's experience um, with her school days, and that visceral feeling of what it's like to be that age. And a lot of the grown-ups don't take you very seriously, but you're going through so many changes. And I hope that answers that question. But
It does indeed. And I mean, I think I was thinking about, as you were talking, when we do author events, a lot of authors, they're giving advice, and there's some advice about, write what you know. And obviously, as a neurodivergent writer, you have experienced those as a child in school as well. So we can all, we've all been through school, but you're writing, from the heart, aren't you? And from your
definitely.
experience.
So if there's anyone watching who is autistic like me, or is, there's things about school that are sometimes hard for us that maybe other people don't appreciate. The bell can be so much louder when it rings. There's so much going on sometimes in a sensory way that we need kind of quiet time. Or, you get home after a long day and you can't say a word because you're just so overwhelmed. So Addie goes through that in a kind of spark, which is things that I went through when I was that age. It's definitely a book that any child, I think, can relate to. But if you are like me, there's definitely touchstones in it that you'll recognize from your days at school or from your days at home. You'll just think, ah, yes, that's what I experience. And that's something I really wanted to make sure was present in the book.
And I think one of the other things that I really liked about it is that Addie is not the only neurodivergent character in the book. So her oldest, I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying
No, it's okay.
her older sister is also neurodivergent. And there's quite an age gap as well, so they can kind of help each other. But what I loved was the point that you made, that you can't just say someone is autistic and they're this, and this is the same for every person. And I think, I wonder whether you would
Yeah.
sort of talk about
There's,
that.
there's definitely, so when like I said to you all, when I was younger, there wasn't any books about people like me, but recently there's a few more popping up here and there, and there seems to be a sort of repetitive idea that gets recycled a lot of the time, that autistic people don't have empathy. Not true. That they are sort of rude and unfeeling, and I was seeing more repeats of that stereotype coming up, and I just think it's very wrong, because autistic people are all so different. They're so different from each other. Yes, the things we have in common are, usually sensory things and motor skills. There's things we have in common, but everyone is so different. And yes, there's two autistic characters in the book, Addie and her older sister Keedy, and they're so different. And it really is exactly as you say, Carrie. It's to illustrate, for one thing, that these things tend to be, they run in families, so they don't tend to be just one person in a family with autism. It's usually a few neurodivergent people, but also to demonstrate, look how different we can be. And similarly in Show Us Who You Are, Adrian and Cora are both neurodivergent but so different, and that's where the comedy comes in, is how unalike they are in so many ways from each other. And I do it consciously, just to make sure that there's a lot of representation, but also just to remind the reader, we're all so different. And
Yeah.
let's take people on a person to person basis and deal with people as they are, and not an idea that we have.
Yeah, I definitely think that's what your book and your books and your writing do, and they're sort of breaking down, like you were talking about the barriers, those four things that you said as to why your books, breaking down those barriers, but also challenging misconceptions. And I think, you do that really sensitively in the book, and it's not judgmental on those people who perhaps have this
Yeah, exactly.
look. That I thought you did that really well. But you talk, there's a bit where a parent approaches Keedy and suggests that she's got better, that it's an illness, but actually it's not that. It's that we're all different and we're all
Yeah.
human.
It's
You know,
exactly that. I'm very yes, for anyone watching, autism is not an illness. It's just a different way of being. And yes, a lot of the things you come across as a neurodivergent person are people who are very well-meaning. And that's sometimes tricky because you don't ever want to upset a well-meaning person because they're just trying their best. It's easy when someone's horrible and rude, and well, it's not easy, but you can sort of go forget them, that they're just being horrible. But when someone's really trying, it's a little bit harder to navigate. And yeah, in Spark, there's a lot of people who are trying to be very understanding, and it's just helping the reader maybe spot, Addie's best friend Audrey, who they're very close, but Audrey sometimes says things that are a little bit off the cuff, and Addie sort of has to explain why that's a misconception, and it's hopefully just a way to allow space for readers to explore this sometimes a difficult topic because people don't want to offend, and it gives them a safe space to go, oh, that's what they mean, but okay. So yes, it's definitely, I hope, exploring lots of avenues for understanding.
yeah, I think having the two sisters, as you said, it can run in families, but to be able to have the conversations, their safe conversations
Yeah,
together, and things that they understood, but they are different from, they are different. They're not
different, yeah.
clones of each other, are they? So that
No,
was,
exactly. I mean, yes, and certainly Kidi and Nina, her twin, are nothing alike. But yeah, the three sisters are all very different. And I think the relationship between the three of them, Addie and Kidi especially, but the three of people really respond to the sisters in the book. And I get a lot of letters from people who are like, I have a Kidi and this is my Kidi, and it's and some people saying, I really want a Kidi. I want an older, sister who's kind of like a mentor and can explain things. It's not something I had as an 11-year-old, so I think I wrote about it to sort of, almost, I mean, almost like an imaginary friend, somebody who could explain away the difficult things when you're 11 years old. But Kidi is very, very human, as that is explored in the book as well. And yeah, the people love the relationship between them, and they are very different. You're right.
but I also think your book is really good at exploring that family dynamic as well, and how, you know, anything that affects anyone in the family,
Yeah,
but particularly children of school age, because it can be such a hard time, and how that impacts on the mum and dad and Nina and obviously Keedy as well. So
definitely. Yeah, it's a little universe, it's a little nucleus, and everyone's like reacting to each other. And those are the books I loved and still love to read. When I was young, I loved Anne of Green Gables, I loved Little Women, I loved going into people's homes where the private conversations are and all the relationships. And I think A Kind of Spark is trying to do that in a modern way. Addie's older sister Nina is a vlogger, and that comes with its own drama. But yeah,
yeah,
so it's funny in parts and hopefully moving in others, and it's very family oriented.
and I think one of the things that is so good about the book is there are the characters that as a reader, you don't particularly like, but what you do is you give redemption to them, so it's a very hopeful book, isn't it? That and little hints to people's backstories, like Mrs. Murphy, and
Yeah,
you know
I
and
definitely,
also,
yeah.
yeah.
I think that's something I always want to try and do, because as much fun as mustache twirling baddies are, they don't tend to belong in books like Spark, where it's very true to the world we live in. And yes, Miss Murphy is the teacher in the book, for those who haven't read it, and she gives Addie a really hard time. And people write to me and say, she's really horrible. And I always say, well, she had to teach Keedy 5 years before, and Keedy was a nightmare who gave her absolute misery. So she's traumatized from that and has now got a younger sibling. And I think it doesn't excuse her actions. I won't give away the book, but it does explain, she's coming with a little bit of history with this family.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and of course the class bully has their own struggle as well. I mean, because that's just life. People who, we don't need to excuse bad behavior, but there is always a reason for it.
yes, yeah. No, I I thought that was very well done, really well done. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your sort of other sort of jobs. So you mentioned that you used to be an editor yourself. Wonder whether you could tell us a little bit more about what that involves, whether people.
Yeah, so a lot of people think an editor is just someone who cuts. So they just get a big red pen and they score out people's writing and say, cut this, cut this. But actually, an editor usually is responsible for helping develop writing. And they read a writer's very rough draft that will probably never be read. And they say, well, let's develop this a little bit more. Let's flesh this out. Let's make this character more prominent. They really do hold a writer's hand and walk them through the story with a little bit of objectivity, a little bit of criticism, and a lot of support as well, and say, let's make this really good. My editor for my books, Isha, is phenomenal, and it's so important for any young writers watching. It's so important to understand that being a really good writer usually means being a really good collaborator and listening to other people, taking their views on board, letting other people read your work, and that's a big part of writing. An editor is a writer's best friend. They're good.
Oh, that's good news, isn't it? Because I was quite interested in, obviously that is a role that you have done as part of your job, but then to be edited, so
Oh
editing
yeah.
someone else, but then to be edited, what was
It
it
can be,
like?
it's really vulnerable. It's really, you feel quite powerful as an editor when you get sent someone's short story. I edited short stories and you'd get sent them and you'd be like, right, time to make this good. And but as a writer, you feel so vulnerable. Like it's your work and it's your, if it's good work, it's usually come from a very vulnerable place. But a good editor will always recognize that, and they will always um they will help you tell the story that you want to tell. So they will look at things and go, what are we trying? This is what I tried to do when I was an editor. They'll look at things and go, what are we trying to portray here? What are you trying to say? At the moment, it's not coming across. So let's find a way to make sure we really make the reader understand what you're trying to say. I think that's the most important thing an editor does. It's not just correct. It's not correcting grammar and spelling, although that's important. It's saying, what are we trying to say? What's the point of view here? And you have a conversation. And if you're a writer, you're alone a lot of the time. So having
Yeah.
an editor gives you a reflection where they say, I care about this like you do. Again, if they're a good editor, I want to tell this story. Let me help you tell it in a way that everybody will understand it as much as possible. And my editor does that, and it's a really hard job. But if anyone watching, if that sounds like something you want to do, it's a great job. So, there's so many great jobs like that in publishing. It's not just being an author.
I think that's really quite interesting for young people to know that actually books and how they are put together. There's a huge sort of team, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
The industry is made up of so many different skill sets, from.
Definitely. If you think at the end of a film, when you see all the credits come down and all those names, a book is very much like that as well. There's so many people who do lots of heavy, there's people who design them, production people and writes and editorial there's so many jobs in publishing, and it takes an absolute village to publish a book. It's not just one person on their own. Which is why awards like this one are so incredible, because they do honor everybody's contribution. Yeah, if you love books, there isn't just writing, there's so many other jobs as well. I do like to say that, because when I was young, publishing was a bit of a secret society and nobody really knew what was going on. But there
Yeah.
is lots for people to do in publishing if you love books.
Mm. The thing that I thought we might just mention as well is we were talking a bit before about the front cover, the illustrator, who is, sorry, I've just
Kay Wilson.
Kay Wilson, sorry, and she's created these just stunning. They're really just wonderful, aren't they?
They're incredible.
Eye-catching covers. Can you tell us a little bit about that collaboration and how
Yeah.
that
So when you finish writing your book and your publishers are on board to publish, they will find you a designer. Some publishers are very big and they have a design in-house in their publisher, but our publisher is so small, so they went on Instagram and they looked for someone who was neurodivergent like me, because they're very supportive of encouraging other underrepresented artists. And they found Kay. And it was, that's quite an extraordinary way to find a designer. It's very unusual. Usually they'll
Yeah.
put an ad somewhere, but they found her on Instagram as a designer, and she loved the book, which I think that's always works best when the designer or the illustrator really understands the story. And she just did these incredible covers, and they're so vibrant, and they really are neurodivergent covers, I like to say. And just for comparison for people, this is the Dutch version of A Kind of Spark, and it's very different. Like, you can see they're
Oh,
completely different books. I really like both, but this is the tree that's mentioned, and that's Addie. But so different, and that's a funny thing as well, is seeing how different designers react to your manuscript, and they all think different moods and things. But yes, if you are artistic, book covers is a great path. And it's so out of your hands as an author. You don't have any say really, unless you're J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. You don't really get much of a say, and I've been so lucky that Kay's covers are just phenomenal, and she really understands me.
yeah, that it looks like a really brilliant pairing. So
Yeah.
that's good. We've got some questions actually that have come up on the Q&A. So I shall go to those and see what people want to know. So it's from Visak at King's Chester. Did you enjoy watching Blue Peter as a child?
Yes, I loved watching Blue Peter when I was a child. I watched when it was Simon, Connie, Matt, and Liz were the four that I watched, and Lucy the dog and Mabel the dog. And I watched, all the time, and it was a way to have adventures. Where I grew up, there wasn't much to do, so we would watch Blue Peter to watch them have adventures and go abseiling and skydiving and all the things that they did. But also it really fostered my love of reading, because Blue Peter features books a lot, and it features theatre a lot. I would watch West End performances on Blue Peter that we couldn't see in Scotland. Yeah, I loved Blue Peter. So that's a great question, because you can absolutely imagine how unbelievable it was to
Have a
actually
look at the badge again.
have a Blue Peter badge.
That's the badge.
This is 28 years in the making, but yeah, it was
Oh,
unbelievable.
highlight. It's really interesting, and there's got to be a little bit of a theme going on, because we've done so many events this week. We had Connie Hook yesterday, ex Blue Peter presenter, I know. Radzi Chinyanganya on Wednesday, ex Blue Peter presenter. And then the week before we had Liz Pichon, and she had a Blue Peter badge.
Yes, she's a
won
previous
the
winner
award.
of this prize.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, I mean, what a gold standard. But yeah, it's incredible. They do so much for books and for reading and just for, childhood in general. And yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm starting my mission to now get a gold. This is the first in a long. I would love to get a gold badge.
So another question from Shane. Have you met any other neurodivergent authors?
In person, I have not. I have not met another neurodivergent. I mean, we are in COVID time, so we're not meeting a lot of people, are we? But I have been reached out to by some incredible. So Dara McNulty has written a book called Diary of a Young Naturalist. This might be a bit old for some of you at the moment, but it's a non-fiction book and it's nature writing, if any of you like that. But he's autistic, and we've chatted a lot through Twitter and through social media because of COVID. But we really support each other, because there are not a lot of us in the industry. And I am the only kind of openly autistic writer in middle grade really at the moment, in the current season. But the whole point of books like this is to change that. And I do get messages from people saying, I think I might be neurodivergent, but I've never talked to anyone about it. And I'm like, great, talk to someone about it. So there's, it's hopefully the start of a big wave of new voices, I would say.
That's really great to hear. And I think, as you said, Nights of probably one of the best publishers at the moment for making sure those different voices and the representation in the industry comes out. So, oh, this is from Ella. I thought it was Elle Chester, but no, it's Ella. This is a question I was going to ask. Who inspired you to read as a child? I was also going to ask you what your favourite sort of books were as a child. So perhaps that could be.
Well, who inspired? Actually, I was inspired to read by teachers who loved reading. I know a lot of people, a lot of grown-ups like to tell children, you must read, it's really important. But we had teachers that showed us how important it was to read because they loved reading. And I had a teacher in primary 6, which is year 7. I don't know English schools, but I was about 10, and he would read Darren Shan at the end of every week, and he would get into it and do the voices, and he would stand on his desk, and he just loved the stories, and we then all loved them too, and it was like a performance, and we would listen to this teacher read, and that was a huge impact on me because that's the first in a series of about 12 books. So when he was finished, I went home and said, Mom, I need the rest. I have to know what happens because the teacher did such a great job. So teachers definitely inspired a love of reading. I read Mallory Blackman when I was 10, same age. It was all same age. I really came into my own when it came to reading. Noughts and Crosses. Everyone on the playground was talking about it. I said, I have to read it. Got it from the library and read it in a day. It was the first time I read a book in a day. And I absolutely fell in love. I thought she was the most incredible writer. And Mallory this week got in touch to say she loved Show Us Who You Are. And that just, I mean, this week could kill me. If anything else comes, I might have an aneurysm.
It's been amazing, Mallory Blackman.
Yeah, so teachers definitely started my love of reading. There weren't many books in my house growing up, so it was teachers.
Yeah, I also remember that. I remember one of my teachers, where we'd sit down at the end of the day reading The Hobbit to us, and it just stayed. She would do the voices. I can still hear it now, and that stayed with me, and that definitely was a catalyst for me wanting to find out more, read more. So we have from Anushka, were you nervous going into meetings with publishers?
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. No one's asked that before. Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking for anyone going into a room full of people you don't know, and that doesn't go away with age. You get, not for me anyway, I get very nervous. But when you know statistically probably that you're the only one of you going into a room, maybe you're the only girl going into a room full of boys, or maybe you're the only person of color going into a room full of white people, whatever it is, you do feel a bit sort of, I feel quite exposed and quite vulnerable. And for the first chunk of those meetings, I didn't tell them I was neurodivergent, which is why I think they felt very free to say what they did. But it's scary. And I know that some of you watching, you might feel like you're very isolated sometimes, or that you're a bit different. And what I would say is the moment I accepted everything about what made me different, that's when all the success started to happen. So I would say, of course it's nerve-wracking, it's scary, but just do it anyway, because that's the only way to get to get where you want to go. But that's a really sensitive question, because yes, I was very nervous. I'm nervous about lots of things. I just always want to do a good job, so nerves don't go away when you get older.
They do not. No, they don't. And I think one of the things that you talk about in the book is you use a term called masking, and everybody as an adult, it doesn't mean that just because you get older, you don't get nervous about things. Yeah. And we all mask, don't we?
Definitely, absolutely. Especially if you work in customer service, that's a whole mask that you have to wear
as a bookseller.
Yeah. Oh yeah, another job I've done. Yes, but.
Whereabouts were you a bookseller?
I was a bookseller there's a bookshop, I think it's closed now, but it's in Leadenhall, which is just down the road from where I am in the City of London. So it would be a nice quiet bookshop, and then at lunchtime all of these bankers and people in suits would come in. And being a bookseller is a hilarious job and a very difficult job, and I'm sure Carrie, I mean, there's so many stories.
Yeah.
But, yeah, but it's a fantastic job. And booksellers are other, you know, when shops open again and it's safe for you guys to go back into bookshops, talk to your booksellers because they always have the best recommendations for how to really get the most out of reading. That was my favorite part of the job, was selling great books to kids that they may not have picked up before.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're just we're missing that sort of contact with our readers, you know, whatever age they are. But introducing new books to people is one of the most satisfying things,
Yeah.
definitely.
And then they come back and say, I loved it. And it's always
More.
yeah.
You really are championing different voices, and as you say, opening those doors. And I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit. I just read in the back of the book that you're a mentor for neurodivergent students at UCL. So I wondered if you could tell us
I
a
mean,
little bit.
that was before COVID came in and kicked all our butts. But I was brought back to, I went to UCL and I was brought back by one of the professors who said, I spoke about trouble I had at university when I was there. I said to the professors, sometimes said, look, it's sometimes hard when there's so many fluorescent lights on me and noise and all that, you know. So if I'm a bit distracted, that's what I basically just told them my needs as a neurodivergent person. And a few of them thought, well, no one's ever said that before. And the next year they said, we think we have students who are a bit anxious or who are also neurodivergent. Can you help them? And I just decided to help, to be the person that I would have liked, who's just someone who says, this is how to get deadlines, you know, handled. This is what to say if you need to get, you know, a little mental health check in. Just helping kind of squeeze those gates apart a bit to stop them being so tight. Because big institutions like universities, they don't know what they don't know, shockingly. So it's just helping people understand that when someone is disabled, and it doesn't have to be my disability, it doesn't have to be neurological, it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be, you know, any kind of disability, they are a person that deserves dignity and respect, and they also are entitled to accommodations. And it's about helping that happen. And if, you know, that's the same for you in school, if you're watching, if you're, you know, you deserve accommodations in school if you need them. I'm sure you're getting them, but you know, it's important to say, I would be able to do my job or my schoolwork better if I had this. That's your right. So that was kind of my job at that time, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
No, it does. And I was just thinking as well, that, you know, the success of your books in a time, as we've said, in a very strange year that we've just had with the pandemic and lockdown, I do wonder whether that has been a really brilliant time for your books to be published, because I don't know what you think, but people have had time perhaps to sit back and reflect and to think about what the most important things are, and you know, that message of actually don't just jump in and judge people,
Yeah,
and take time to perhaps analyze what's actually going on, and
exactly. Because I think with, you know, this is all new for us. This is a new thing. We would normally be talking in person. Um, and I think a great thing for the future would be to have a hybrid so that people can still have things like this and go back to the way things were. Because for some people, this is easier. For a lot of my readers who are disabled, events like this are ideal for them because it means they can finally be included. And I think that's what's an important message in the books, is saying we can think about everyone, and everyone, not just people like us. We can start understanding that everyone has different needs, everyone has different obstacles in their way, and that we kind of now, Spark is very about community, and Show Us Who You Are is very about autonomy. And I do think that they're both being received well at the moment because of those things. It's saying, let's all treat each other with respect and be a community that takes care of each other. And I think that's something people like in current times, and hopefully it's something that we can take forward.
I agree completely. I was thinking about that the other day. We've done, at Home with Four Indies, we've done over 220 events in the last year. And we had very quickly to go from physical events to online events.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that the audiences that we've been able to kind of capture and talk to and communicate with have been different. And I still think that there's a future for both.
Yeah,
And
I
there's
agree.
benefits to both
Yeah.
for everybody. Yeah.